Hi there, welcome to HUD's History. Today we're going to be looking at the Eastern Front of World War II, as well as what was going on down in the Mediterranean areas, specifically in Egypt. So if you've watched the first part of this series of World War II, then you understand where we started at, and this is just continuing on. So if you are ready, we're going to get going. So like this video so you can see the other ones. And buckle up. Let's talk about the Eastern Front. Looking at World War II, it is broken into different parts because of the way that it goes, and it's easier to basically focus on certain regions under the scope of the entire war. Otherwise, you're going back and forth constantly with the battles that are taking place in the European theater, also the Mediterranean, North African theater, the Pacific theater, the Atlantic theater. It's just a lot of places to go to. So that's why we're looking at it as different regions. So we already talked about the beginning of the war with the Nazi going into certain places such as Poland and Czechoslovakia, as well as Austria. And then with that invasion of Poland that officially starts World War II, the Germans are going to quickly maneuver to try and take down France, because they don't have to worry about a two-front war because of their non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. And then they're also going to go north and hit places like Denmark and Norway in order to set up bases to attack Great Britain, because they know Great Britain is the strongest country left that could be perilous to them. So by the time you get to 1940, as you can see on the map, this is what the continent is looking like, where Greater Germany is consisting of Germany and some of the territories it's already conquered, as well as having Italy, and Italy has conquered Albania, as well as going into some of the Mediterranean territories that it had been defeated by in World War I. Because Hitler had tried to take on Britain, the only way that he could do it was through his Luftwaffe, the Air Force, and because of this, he loses a lot of resources, a lot of men, a lot of time, and after about a year, he eventually just gives up on it because he doesn't want to waste any more time, and pretty much feels that Britain has kind of been put at bay because they can't launch a major offensive against them, because they'd have to come across the English Channel, and the Germans would be able to figure out that they were coming across. So he gives up on Britain, and then he turns to the east, and he also turns to North Africa. So he wants to take the Soviet Union. He decides that that is a big piece. He had made that non-aggression pact with Stalin, but then later decides that he actually wants the land and resources from the Soviet Union, which Stalin is not going to be too appreciative of. And the other thing is that because he has an alliance with the Italians, with Mussolini, that he's going to send support as they fight in the northern part of Africa, specifically going into Libya and Egypt. In 1940, the Italian troops specifically attacked Egypt, and at that point, Britain had controlled Egypt for a while. In 1941, they had taken about 130,000 Italian soldiers prisoners, and Mussolini seemed to be faltering really harshly and asked Hitler for some help. Hitler felt that Mussolini was not very strategically smart, and so he ends up having to send in some of his men and troops in order to help save the Italian offensive. So he's going to end up sending in people along with his best general, which we'll get to in a second. But if you can see the map here, you can see it's not just the Italians fighting the British. The British have brought in others from different colonies and areas that they control. So you can see the Indian division, that would be from India. The Australian division is there, as well as the United Kingdom or the Great British soldiers. So you have a lot of these different groups there, and the Italian army is in what we consider Libya at the time. Libya had been an Italian colony. So you have these territories that are fighting against each other, these big powers, and they are using every resource that they can. The Italians were not aware of how quickly the British would defend them or defeat them and take them down. And because of that, you are seeing Italy looking as kind of a weaker opponent, and actually a weaker ally for Germany than Germany had anticipated. So Hitler sends in his one of the most famous generals, this General Erwin Rommel, and he is the commander of what's known as the Africa Corps. It is the tank division, and they send tanks to North Africa in order to go up against the British. The British had created a pretty spectacular corps of tanks themselves. So this is a big tank battle that happens. Erwin Rommel is Rommel, I should say, is nicknamed the Desert Fox because he has been so used to fighting these types of battles. And by the time he gets to 1942, he had actually pushed back onto the Brits and had forced them back into territories within Egypt. The British had pushed their way into Libya, which, like I said, was originally a colony of Italy. But now you have this counteroffensive by Erwin Rommel, and he will go in and take his tank division and push back. So they're going to push back, and you can see here on the map where they are specifically pushing to where the Italians get the British kind of out of the way of where they were at. Unfortunately, this won't do them a whole lot of good because eventually you're going to get the other allies in there. Specifically, when the United States gets involved, they're going to come over and you're going to start to see specific operations that target North Africa because they're going to try and push those Axis forces out of North Africa back into Europe. Now, with that going on, you also have what's happening in the eastern part of Europe. Germany and Hitler had started making their way towards the east. They already had the western half of Poland. So now it's just a matter of trying to get these other countries in the east under their control. So Hitler actually persuades Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary to join his alliance. Unfortunately, Yugoslavia and Greece will resist because they do not see a benefit in being with Hitler. Because of that, Germany is then going to send in massive amount of troops and invade both of them in April of 1941. Yugoslavia is going to fall in about 11 days, and Greece will fall in approximately 2.5 weeks. So there's not a whole lot of defense against the Germans with their superior military. And when that happens, as you can see here on this map, just the swift mobilization of the military by the Germans, and you see their Second Army, the Hungarian Third Army, and the Italian Second Army will all push their way into Yugoslavia. And then from there, you have the German 12th Army, which is in Bulgaria, is going to push down into Greece. So it was one thing if Germany had to go and attack Hungary and Bulgaria as well, but because they joined in the alliance, it was easier for them to then take on Yugoslavia as well as Greece. So how does Europe look at this point? You can see all these different areas that are controlled by the Axis powers, by Germany and Italy in Europe, going from France in the west all the way over to Romania and Bulgaria in the east. This is now going to set up a launching pad for the Germans to try and go into the Soviet Union. And you got to understand that Stalin kind of sees what's going on, and he doesn't really understand that it's a setup to Soviet Union invasion. he sees it more as Hitler's taken over certain territories, but Stalin's taken over Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia. So it's really not like he assumes that they're next. He just thinks that everybody's kind of taking their land that, they believe is part theirs. So that's going to be the setup until the actual invasion starts. This is going to be what's known as Operation Barbarossa. It happens on June 22nd in 1941. Obviously, Stalin is not ready for an invasion by the Germans, and the Russian troops, I should say, are not that well trained and prepared for this German invasion. And Germany quickly pushes itself into the Soviet territory. They go about 500 miles inward into the Soviet Union. And because of that, a lot of the Russian forces are going to have to basically flee. They have to retreat backwards. And one of the things that they do is, because of the fact that they have to retreat so quickly, they have to leave things there. And they don't want the Germans to use any of their equipment or stuff in order to attack them. What they do is they use what's called a scorched earth policy, which they had used previously against the Russians had against Napoleon, where they will burn things and destroy things as they retreat. So that way the Germans have no use for them. They can't use the resources. They can't use any of that stuff. When Napoleon had invaded Russia, they did the same thing where they burned the crops, where they killed the livestock, so that the Napoleon's troops couldn't use any of that stuff. They do the same thing here with their military weapons that they have to leave behind. They also burn crops and whatnot as they retreat so that the Germans can't use them. When you get to September of 1941, you will get what's known as the Battle of Leningrad. And this is where you have a long drawn out battle over the winter. Over 1 million people are going to die, but the Soviets hang in there and the city doesn't fall, which is important because of the fact that it allows the Soviets to keep cities while also making the Germans use more of their resources. Here's the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. As you can see, they are basically attacking from different areas on the east. So from what they call Greater Germany, through the parts of Poland that they control, even from Romania. They go across into the Ukrainian territory, which the Soviet Union's control or did control. And you can see how far they push. They even get up to Moscow. If you can see Moscow right there in the upper right part of the map. With that said, in October, Moscow is going to be attacked. Unfortunately, there's a problem here with the Germans, and if Hitler had known his history, he would have realized what happened with Napoleon's troops, because the same thing happens with his troops. The Germans are still in their summer uniforms. It is a long distance to move their supply lines and their weaponry, their troops, everything. And so to get uniforms from Germany all the way up to where they're at in the Soviet territory is a long distance. And because of that, the Soviets actually have an upper hand because they fought before in winters. They understand what it's like, the brutal winters of the Soviet Union. Obviously, Hitler does not learn from 130 years earlier with Napoleon. The Russians dig in, and the cry of no retreat is on, and the Soviets will hold until 1943, and they will basically save Moscow from defeat by the Germans. Unfortunately, they are going to lose about 500,000 people. That is a lot of people, but the Soviet Union had a mass amount of population, far higher than Germany, which allowed them to basically bring more troops up when they needed them. Unfortunately, they get killed a lot, but a population that is that big has the ability to kind of withstand the attack that the Germans are giving. The turning point on the Eastern Front is going to be these battles in Leningrad and Moscow. And that's because they are forcing the Germans to use all these resources, right? Unfortunately, the Germans do not claim victory in either of these battles, and the Soviets are going to hold their ground and basically force the Germans to retreat just a bit. And as that's happening, it's going to give time for the Allies on the other side in the West, particularly France and Great Britain, time to plan an attack. Now, we still haven't talked about the United States. The United States is going to come in, of course, after the incident that brings them in, and they're going to help to prepare for attack on the western side of Europe. And that's significant because Stalin will start asking the Allies for help. He's going to say, you need to attack on the West because I can't keep holding on in the East. And he asked for more help, which is going to come after the United States is pulled in the war. But obviously, they're not going to be pulled into the war by the Germans. They're going to be pulled in by the third Axis power, which we really haven't talked about yet. And we'll talk about that in the next video, which will talk about the United States and their conflict with Japan. So there you go. That's the Eastern Front in a nutshell. That's the Eastern Front. That is where we see what's going on over here with these different countries, specifically with the Soviets, with Romania, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, and how Germany kind of influences that territory, as well as how the Italians are making do in North Africa against the Brits, in Egypt, and in Libya. So there you go. If you like this video, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel so that you can see more videos. Today's tip of the day is don't let anything come between you and your family. Your family is what you have, and they're there to support you. So make sure that you don't let little things come between. Make sure you say, I love you to them. Make sure you thank them for their support. And remember that they will help you get through anything. So until next time, this has been Hud's History. I'm Mr. Hudson. Peace out. Till next time.